the island of Rhodes. According to some contemporary accounts, Rhodes was once home to what by today's standards would be considered high technology. In the 5th century BC, the poet Pindar wrote that Rhodes was once adorned with statues that came to life, like living and moving creatures.
He wrote that they all of a sudden became alive. And so the question then arises, well, if you have a lifeless object first, and then all of a sudden somebody breathes life into something, could it be that we have references to some type of machines?
Where did the people of Rhodes get the knowledge of how to create these moving statues 2,500 years ago? I believe that it is just what Pindar said, which is they got it from the gods. Well, who are these gods? The gods are real people. They're extraterrestrials who had this technology, shared it with humanity, and now when we see the Antikythera mechanism, there's something you can put your hands on that shows that they had the capability to do advanced machine work. It's 1,500 years too early at least. The point is, that technology really exists, and from a technology like that, going to robotics is not too much further, and extraterrestrials would very well have had that capability for the time, if you believe what this legend says on face value.
Could the Antikythera mechanism be proof that the ancient Greeks had technology far in advance of the times in which they lived? And might this be evidence that there really were functioning robots on the island of Rhodes? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes, and claim there is also evidence that advanced robots existed 300 miles to the north on another Greek island, Lemnos. Here lie the ruins of Hephaestia, one of the most important cities in Greece. It is named for the Greek god of metallurgy, Hephaestus, who was said to have fallen here from the sky and actually existed on Earth alongside humans.
He's described in his workshop as being surrounded by automated robots. He flips on machines, and they bustle around doing all the sort of the hard, busy work for him.
One of Hephaestus' most famous and amazing creations was Talos, a giant man made of bronze who protected the island of Crete.
Talos was able to observe all of the ships approaching Crete and hurl stones at those ships. And he was able to release this heat and thus incinerating any boat or anything that would come close to him. So is it possible that Talos was some type of a machine or a robot?
Greece isn't the only place where ancient stories can be found about inanimate objects that appear to come to life. The Jewish Talmud describes a clay figure called the golem that could be brought to life by inserting a spell into its mouth. In India, an ancient Sanskrit text called the Lokapanati tells of spirit movement machines as far back as the 5th century BC. And the Chinese text, the Liezhu, describes a humanoid robot being presented to King Mu as far back as 3,000 years ago.
There are stories from many cultures, from all over the planet, of people who have either created other humans or machines that were very much like humans.
But if sophisticated robots really did exist in the ancient world, what function did they serve? Who built them? And perhaps, more importantly, what happened to them? On March 24th, 2015, the Mars rover called Opportunity reaches the west rim of the 14-mile-wide Endeavour crater. It is searching for minerals and other evidence that might prove that life once existed here. It is one of several remote-controlled robots that for more than a decade have provided NASA with invaluable information about our closest alien planet.
Well, NASA successfully controlled robots over, crazy distances. They would execute the plan here on the ground, then they would upload those instructions to the robot on Mars.
Another NASA robot, the Humanoid Robonaut 2, works on the International Space Station. And in development is the so-called super robot, Valkyrie, which is designed to set up habitats and pave the way for humans on other planets.
When humans go out into space, it's very difficult and dangerous and time-consuming. It's far easier to send robots. And if that's what we do, that's sure as heck what extraterrestrials are going to be doing.
Los Angeles, California, May 2018. At UCLA's Biomechatronics Lab, Georgios Tsoukalos meets with Associate Professor of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering, Dr. Veronica Santos. Dr. Santos is working to make robots even more human-like by giving them the ability to not only detect, but also to react to physical contact.
This here is an artificial finger that can sense touch.
That's right, we're sensing multiple modalities of touch. So this is the same type of sensor that this finger is built around, and it can measure vibration and internal fluid pressure. It can measure how the finger pad is deformed. You can squeeze the finger pad, it's deformable like your own finger pad.
Okay.
And we can even measure temperature and use that to infer material properties. This is what the finger looks like without the skin on.
Okay.
So you can see the electrodes, and there's a pressure sensor inside that allows us to get vibration.
And these dots are the electrodes.
Yes.
Oh, how cool.
Here we have the bear claw visualizer. If you squeeze the fingertip, you'll actually see how the finger pad is deforming. Up here, this is the array of electrodes.
Okay.
We can measure the resistance of those electrodes as the finger pad is being squished. This is probably one of the most sensorized, dexterous robot finger test beds that's out there.
Oh, wow. That is wild.
So would this finger be able to determine whether or not it is touching foam or a hard piece of glass?
Yes, they have different stiffnesses or rigidities. So one of the movements that you would make with a human hand or a robot hand would be to push against the object.
So if this could ever be combined with AI, do you think that one day we will have humanoid robots that can go and maybe explore Mars?
Yeah, I think we can. I do see humanoid robots becoming more of a reality and spans the spectrum of from neuroprosthetics to robots colonizing Mars.
Although the notion of using human-like robots is highly controversial, it also has the potential to make its developers and investors a great deal of money. Money which in turn could be used to finance the development of artificial humans that could, in the future, be almost indistinguishable from the real thing. Robots that could conceivably express their desires, feel pain, even display a wide range of emotions.
Can robots actually have emotion? We cannot really define what true emotion is. So if we don't know really what emotion is, can we actually create an artificial emotion?
If a robot is able to differentiate between good and bad sensations, even to experience pain, is this the first step towards forming emotions or perhaps even consciousness? Ancient astronaut theorists suggest that extraterrestrials have intervened on Earth throughout our history in order to prepare us for this moment in time and show us that we are not so different from machines. The historical text, the Lysi, written in the 4th century BC, by the Chinese philosopher Lai Yukao, provides a detailed account of an encounter between a king and a robot that could talk and move exactly like a human.
A brilliant mechanical engineer brought a gift to his king. This was King Mu of the Zhou dynasty. And the gift was an automaton, a machine of sorts in the form of a gracious courtier who entertained everyone, could sing beautifully, and moved graciously like a human being, one of extraordinary grace and gentleness. And all went well until the performance ended. And then the mechanical courtier winked at the women and began flirting shamelessly, which upset the king.
When the king tried to dismantle this thing, he said that the moment he took out the heart, the mouth could no longer speak. The moment he took out the kidneys, he could no longer see. And the moment he took out the liver, he could no longer walk. Which raises an interesting question. If it is an artificial person, was it really the kidney, the liver, and the heart? Or could it have been different batteries that were powering different aspects of the robot?
We have to ask ourselves, was the robot that King Mu witnessed one of these technological devices inspired or even made by the gods who were extraterrestrials?
Abydos, Egypt, 7 miles west of the Nile. Within this expansive archaeological site lies the ruins of the Osiris Hall, where thousands would gather to worship the god of the underworld.
In comparison to many of the gods, Osiris was actually thought to have lived physically on Earth as one of Egypt's pharaohs. He is often depicted with a winged disk of the sun. And while many scholars have suggested that this is nothing else but to worship the sun, that sun, as far as the Egyptians were concerned, also had wings, and it descended from the sky. So in my opinion, something else was depicted, an extraterrestrial event that in fact took place in real life.
Although most ancient astronaut theorists believe that the Egyptian gods were, in reality, extraterrestrial visitors, there are many who wonder if Osiris was even made of flesh and blood.
One of the most famous stories that go hand in hand with Osiris was that he was dismembered by his jealous brother Seth.
Set went into a fury and tore his brother's dead body to shreds, tore it into 14 pieces, had it scattered far and wide all over the kingdom. But Isis, the loyal wife, searched far and wide and found the pieces and pulled it together.
Isis succeeded in resurrecting him. Now, when I hear a story like that a being is dismembered and then somebody puts together those pieces and then they're able to magically resurrect him, I have to ask the question, is it possible that Osiris was not some type of biological entity, but perhaps he was some type of a machine or a robot?
For ancient astronaut theorists, perhaps the strongest evidence that Osiris may have been a robot can be found in the ancient pyramid texts, which describe the symbol of the Djed pillar as Osiris's spine.
Osiris in his resurrected form was portrayed as a pillar that clearly resembles a modern-day Tesla coil. The Djed pillar was considered a power pillar.
In this one carving at Abydos, it is as if Isis has her hand inserted into Osiris's back. And so perhaps it illustrates how she was manipulating Osiris. Could it be that the story of Osiris is something completely different than what we have thought?
Norway, November 2014. Scientists from the University of Oslo work on a new breakthrough in robotics, creating robots that are able to adapt and continue functioning even after losing a limb. The robots also know how to create new limbs with the use of a 3D printer and reapply them, effectively repairing themselves without the aid of a human being. This new technology is the first step in achieving what Hungarian scientist John von Neumann envisioned back in the 1940s: self-replicating robots.
John von Neumann was a mathematician that had an idea about self-replicating machines, where you send out a seed machine and that machine will seek out raw materials to construct a copy of itself, and then that will then send that machine out to replicate itself.
So 1 become 2, 2 become 4, and eventually these things would be able to explore the entire cosmos. Now, one theory is that extraterrestrial civilizations would build space probes like that, and that would be the quickest way to explore the entire universe.
The interesting question is going to be the extent to which part of that self-replication includes the memories and the learning that the first generation of robots engage with. So you'd want to make the robots as open to new experiences as we are, but at the same time be able also to pass on the experiences from any given generation to the next generation through self-replication. So I think that this could be a very important way in terms of space travel to go. I mean, I think the more interesting question from the standpoint of ourselves as human beings is the extent to which we remain part of that process.
Is it possible that we could create self-aware robots that are completely autonomous and send them off to explore the universe unassisted? And might these robots be able to self-replicate endlessly using materials found on distant planets? Ancient astronaut theorists propose that extraterrestrial beings may have already achieved this technology.
It is entirely possible that an advanced civilization, and I'm saying far more advanced than we are on Earth, could actually develop this technology of self-replicating machines, and then could send artificially intelligent robots out into space as sentinels that scan a much vaster area than that civilization itself could go to with manned probes. It's something that probably is already very widely in use by a variety of extraterrestrial civilizations.
The von Neumann machines are an awesome idea that is reflected in ancient stories of extraterrestrials coming to Earth. In the ancient Egyptian tradition, we learn of these formless light beings that emerged from what they describe as the island of the egg and create civilization. It suggests that they're utilizing some kind of self-replicating robot that has the ability to utilize genetic forms, perhaps imported from the home planet, that can then be manifested on a new planet, in our case, Earth.
Is it possible that evidence of self-replicating robots can be found in ancient historical and religious texts, such as those concerning ancient Egypt? And if so, is mankind today merely tapping into knowledge that was available on Earth thousands of years ago? Knowledge that might have been brought here by extraterrestrial space travelers. According to some ancient astronaut theorists, the concept that extraterrestrial life forms may have first visited the Earth as machines or robots is not only likely, but logical. In the early morning hours of November 5th, 2005, the luxury cruise ship, the Seabourn Spirit, found itself under attack by pirates in the waters off the coast of Somalia. But the Somali bandits were successfully repelled by a relatively new and formidable defensive weapon, a long-range acoustic device, or LRAD. Manufactured by the LRAD Corporation, this sonic device can, when focused on a target, produce a piercing sound that can exceed 150 decibels, enough to cause temporary blindness, nausea, and permanent hearing loss.
The U.S. Army used sonic weapons in Iraq. They're used in crowd control. There are certain types of low rumbles and signals that will affect a person. They make you feel sick.
The LRAD is currently used by law enforcement, the military, and private security, and is considered the ultimate in sonic weaponry. But is the LRAD really a 21st century invention? Or is there evidence that similar audio weapons existed in ancient times? Approximately 17 miles northeast of Jerusalem lies the ancient ruins of the city of Jericho. Here, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of settlements dating back to 9000 BC. According to the Hebrew Bible, Jericho is believed to be where God spoke to Joshua, the successor to Moses, and instructed him to march around the walled city once every 6 days with 7 priests carrying ram's horns, and followed by the Ark of the Covenant, the golden chest containing the 10 Commandments. Then, on the 7th day, under orders by God, Joshua and the Israelites marched around the perimeter of the city one last time. But this time, they blew the ram's horns. The walls of Jericho fell, and the city was sacked.
In the Old Testament, you see very clear descriptions in Joshua 6 about the shofar, which is described as a trumpet that was used in the Battle of Jericho to actually bring the walls down.
To religious scholars, the collapse of Jericho's walls was a miracle. To most modern-day scientists and historians, the destruction was most probably caused by an earthquake. But could it have been something else? Could the Israelites have possessed advanced sound wave technology? If so, where did it come from?
In the scriptures, we have a fascinating story about the fall of the walls of Jericho. Armies were told to circle the wall repeatedly and then finally blow their horns, and down came the walls. And we know there was a powerful presence, the Ark of the Covenant. This mysterious sacred item was with them at all times, which of course was part of the event and part of the fall of the walls of Jericho.
The idea that some kind of sonic weapon was used to destroy these huge, thick, ancient walls to allow the Israelites to basically take over that city is a fascinating one. So what kind of technology were they using? It sounds utterly fantastic to us that they could have had some kind of advanced alien technology. It's clearly what they're describing.
There is little doubt that the Ark of the Covenant was a weapon. It was described as a weapon. Famously, when the Israelites crossed over into Canaan, they had to pass by Jericho. And it could be that there was some technology. We do not know what that technology was, but there was clearly an association between the Ark and the falling down of the walls, and that's the reason that the Ark was sent around the periphery of the city.
According to many ancient astronaut theorists, Moses and the Israelites acquired a supernatural source of energy at Mount Sinai. This powerful energy source was later contained in the Ark of the Covenant and would have provided the kind of power necessary to amplify Joshua's horns and make them into a powerful sonic weapon.
But what's interesting about the Battle of Jericho is that this particular use of the shofar clearly seems to be the same thing that we're seeing with particle beam technology, death ray technology, thunderbolt technology. It very clearly seems that once again we have an extraterrestrial technology that the ancient people had at the ready that they could use when needed for military campaigns.
The Andes Mountains, Peru. Here, 12 miles north of Puma Punku, lie the murky waters of Lake Titicaca, the largest lake in South America. According to local legends, the god Viracocha rose up from the depths of this lake to create the sun, the stars, and mankind.
Legend states that Viracocha, the great creator god of the Inca and the prehistoric civilization of that area, emerged from Lake Titicaca. He went to Tiwanaku and brought civilization to that part of the world. He then went to Puma Punku, and this is where he said he made men and women from stone and took them to the four corners of the earth to spread their seed.
The Spanish conqueror asked the Inca, the people living there, including the king of the Inca, what is this Puma Punku? And they all said, it's not us. It's not our forefather who made this. This were made by the gods in one single night. Usually a king is proud about what his people did, about the precision and so on. In that case, the chief and the people said, no, it was not us. It was the gods who made it.
One of the legends of Puma Punku states that it was built by a race of giants in one night after a great cataclysm and flood had destroyed the whole area. But what's really interesting is that who were these giants? Where did they come from? Was it Viracocha and his band of followers? Or was it some other beings from some other place?
One of the earliest chronicles that we have in regards to Puma Punku talks about that these giant platforms were moved through the air by the sound of a trumpet. They basically floated into place. So do we have some type of sound technology here? And the answer is a potential yes.
Might the legends of giants and stones floating through the air have been inspired by some sort of mysterious events in the distant past? Or were they the result of alien beings visiting Earth in prehistoric times, as ancient astronaut theorists believe?
Now I come with a speculation. Extraterrestrials arrive, the spaceship stands in orbit. Only a smaller space vehicle comes down like a space shuttle. So, just to protect their instruments, they make overnight, with their technology, what we call a base camp. Of course made out of stones found on Earth, because you don't transport granite or diorite from another solar system. And then they disappear. But the wall of their base camp is still there. Now the natives come. They see these ruins. They touch it with their fingers. They say, look at this, it's so smooth, it's so sharp. The gods did it. The place becomes a holy place. And now the natives start to construct temples, altars in honor of the gods. So you have two technologies. One was an extraterrestrial technology, and the other was the humans with their altars and their temples.
Luxor, Egypt. Here, along the east bank of the Nile River, lie the archaeological remains of the vast Karnak temple complex, dating to the 32nd century BC. With its numerous structures, including great halls, obelisks, and an avenue of sphinxes. Karnak represents the combined achievement of many generations of Egypt's ancient builders.
When one travels to Luxor and gazes upon the Karnak temple, we see large pillars, oversized obelisks, and what's very amazing about this area is that it's one of the few places where over 30 pharaohs contributed to its sheer size and wealth of knowledge over a vast period of time.
For centuries, archaeologists and scholars have considered Karnak to be one of the most dramatic examples of the remarkable technological ability of early man. But do the construction techniques used in building these incredible monuments reveal evidence of something more, something not of this earth?
When we start looking at hieroglyphs, we are amazed as to how beautiful and how carefully they have been carved. The technology which we see is clearly of a perfection which is beautiful and almost makes our heart cry whenever you come face to face with it.
Experts believe the most impressive evidence of advanced machining can be found on Karnak's tall, four-sided tapering monuments called obelisks.
The obelisk is carved with the same inscriptions on four sides, and they're all exactly the same, and they're beautifully cut and articulated hieroglyphs into this red granite stone.
We would look at it today and say it had to be some sort of machine that carved these things out. For example, there were slots. They were only 0.14 inches wide, half-inch deep. When you look inside, you can see the bottom of them were made by a rotating tool. So this was a tool that punched in, came out, stepped down, punched in, came out. The human hand, no matter how good you are, can never do that. The tool marks themselves, the precision, the depth, the rotating impressions that were made were not done by hand. Some of those were so precisely engraved as to require machine tools to do it. The toolkit that we see that the ancient Egyptians were supposed to use, there's no way that any of those tools could produce the results that we saw.
To many scholars, the apparent precision used in the construction of the obelisks at Karnak suggests a 21st century level of expertise.
Precision is what our civilization is built on. To craft something to within 2/10,000ths of an inch or 1,000th of an inch is quite common today because that tolerance or that precision is necessary and it has purpose.
But how can we explain such precision in ancient construction?
If you look at the Ramses statue, it is so perfect that you wonder how this was even done with allegedly primitive tools, because today we could only do this with machines.
So the way we check the symmetry of the Ramses statue is to take two images, the same photographs, make transparencies, and compare the left to the right. We flip it over and bring it over the original, and as we can see, we have a perfect match. The ancient Egyptians were very skilled at working granite. I cannot see how they could have created what they created with the tools that are commonly accepted to have been in the ancient Egyptians' toolbox, such as copper chisels, or stone chisels, wooden mallets, stone balls.
But if, as many historians and archaeologists contend, the ancient builders did not possess the equivalent of modern tools, how were these monuments built with such mathematical precision? Perhaps the answer can be found by comparing an example of ancient sculpture with one made by more modern methods.
We can compare the aluminum model, the face machine, the striations coming down the face with the striations coming down the face of the statue of Karnak in Egypt. And also the tool marks, so where we see above the eyebrow, the dig-in right there, where it kind of shows us what kind of tools or the shape of the tools that they use. So the elements that bring this machining to ancient statue are not just the symmetry, but also the geometry, the precision, and the tool marks. And we have all three elements in modern machining and ancient statuary. It's an enormously difficult thing to do by hand without introducing some mechanical assistance. Seems to me to be impossible.
But if the tool marks seen on the Ramses statue appear identical to those made by modern methods, wouldn't it prove that the ancient builders had access to machines, and perhaps even electricity?
They allegedly did not have electricity, power tools. Supposedly they didn't have diamond saws. But yet, they're doing things that would require precision work, precision tools. So where did they get those things? How could they have had these advanced machining tools that we've only just acquired ourselves today in our civilization? So one answer would have to be they've gotten it from ancient aliens.
In the center of the temples at Tiwanaku lie the ruins of a stone arch called the Gateway of the Sun. Cut and shaped from a single andesite stone, weighing more than 10 tons, archaeologists believe the 10-foot-tall, 13-foot-wide megalith was once the gateway leading to Puma Punku.
The Gateway of the Sun is probably the entrance, or one of the entrances, to the Puma Punku temple. And as such, it's very important because this is how the people of Tiwanaku conducted their ritual, by funneling people through increasingly smaller gateways and stairways to more and more sacred precincts.
On the upper portion of the arch, intricate carvings can be found of nearly 50 winged beings on either side of what is believed to be the great creator god Viracocha. Interpretations of the engravings suggest they refer to a calendar describing a time as far back as 27,000 BC.
So here we are at the famous Gate of the Sun with Viracocha right in the middle, holding two scepters, surrounding by birdmen.
That's a common depiction in ancient societies, is a man who's able to fly. That would have probably been an interpretation by the native people of someone coming from the sky or from the heavens.
It's part of our idea, too, that some giant airship that was a factory with power tools and power saws and routers and drills just landed here and began processing these giant blocks of stone and then ultimately created Puma Punku.
It seems like the whole complex was some kind of technological kind of factory. And if my research is correct, it looks like they were using it to create energy of some sort. So what some people suggest is that they were using electricity and power tools, which sounds incredible when we think about it because they're a modern invention. But actually, if you look at the quality of the stonework, you have to admit something like that was going on there.
When you look at the complexity of Puma Punku, the huge platforms, the interlocking blocks that was made into what they thought were indestructible walls, what you could have is the kind of perfectly made granite spaceport that extraterrestrials would want.